Well, first of all, thanks a lot to Wendy and OOGA TWOOGA. You will also see in what the stuff that I'm going to show you, the work I'm going to show you, that there are some overlaps actually with OOGA TWOOGA in the past year. So I try to connect a little bit what I showed to LA and also the location. But yeah, basically, I run a design studio in Berlin, and since 2003 we've been engaged very strongly in working closely with artists on artist books and publications, but where the book is more really part of a specific project or a narrative. So most of them are not really like monographs, they're more like books where form a certain discourse, or their books itself are even the exhibition. And I'm going to show you several examples of the works that I've been doing with my students in the last years, not only around books, but also which have reached into other areas. So I would like to start by showing you a project which I think kind of explains very well how I've been working with books and pushing also a little bit the format of how you deal with books in itself in relation to documenting artworks and also writing or documenting artworks which are particularly ephemeral. In this case, this is a book I did together with an artist called Tristan Michel, who is a performance artist from England. So what he does is he performs in front of an audience for certain amounts of time and textual pieces, performance pieces, which are very strongly related to concrete poetry. I don't know if you're familiar with what concrete poetry is, but so basically he takes also fragments of language and cut and paste them together, and the audience can sometimes even interpret by listening to him their own story. So it's an artwork which is particularly difficult, of course, to document and to also put in the format of the book. So when he asked me to start working together, we thought together about, he was invited to an exhibition in the north of Germany, and we together decided we would like to buy a printing machine, which at the time already was very easily available, because a lot of printers are going bankrupt. So we bought this offset machine and put it during the period of the exhibition into the exhibition space, and used the budget to employ a printer every day and to print for us in the exhibition space. So the images you can see this is the exhibition space, and through that it allowed us every day to make different experiments how to transcribe this work, so how to transcribe these performances. For example, one example of one sheet that we printed on the machine, which very much has to do with language and how you translate also the act of performances of Tris into typography and language. This is another example, big enough. If you start reading, you understand the experiment. So this one is all typeset in lowercase, and then the spaces in between, they have to do with the breathing and the rhythm that he performs as pieces. So these are just different now. This one is too small. But you get the idea. This is a piece of paper that he used in every performance. He reads it and then cheers them during the performance on the floor, and we scanned it and also reprinted it on his printing machine during the exhibition. Also different photographs. So they were really just things playing around with the printing machine during the exhibition, and they're basically having fun using the space at that time. And in the end, what we did is we collected all these sheets and they piled up in the exhibition space, and afterwards we started working on the book, which is a book which in the end we decided to make two books which are simultaneous. So we have the same cover, the same ISBN number, everything is exactly the same. Just on the inside, the stories are slightly different. So even the way this book tries to basically document 4 or 5 different pieces of his work, but even these 5 works always change. They tell us, sometimes they change, tells the story differently of this work, or the narrative of the stories change. So it's not so fixed as his own work. So the attempt in the book was also to give different storylines of how you can approach the work. And in the book, we just then inserted different of these inserts also. So what you can see here is some of the pages, and then the little sheets that we printed during the exhibition being inserted. This is the one I think you saw at the very beginning. So also the sheets then mirror again the text that goes on the page and with the insert, so it has this double game all the time in the book. And it was distributed basically just with the same numbers, so some people didn't even know which one they picked up, so there was no comparison, like someone might have read version 1, another person might have read version 2, but they actually never knew that they both exist. It's the exhibition space. And yeah, so one link, of course, very much also with OOGA TWOOGA is that I do, or my studio does all the graphic design for a fashion label called Bless. And over the years we got very strongly involved not only in doing all the graphic design, but also, of course, the communication, the lookbooks. Actually, how we first got to know each other, that they started asking us to work on a book. This is already the second one, the first one is sold out. This one I think is also sold out. But Wendy still has two, I brought them from you. And if you're interested, you can also have a look at it. And so for each collection, we do basically a new concept, which also corresponds to the shows and the collection that Bless does. So what you see there is just different postcards from different collections that Bless made. But basically the strong part about working with Bless is that they have been always very concerned with how they can escape from the fashion industry and also the circulation within the fashion industry. So how you can bring the products closer also to people and to a human being, let's say a person. So they always say like the most important is actually the person's brain, not necessarily the way that they look. So how can you make clothing that the brain is exposed through the clothing? No? So this is very much Bless philosophy. And so for each, they don't have défilés, so they don't have these catwalk situations where they use usually once a football match where the different teams are dressed in their clothes, or a dinner where people sit on a table and they wear the clothing and you can go and you should dinner. So also that form of how they do the presentation, since the very beginning of doing these lookbooks, which come out every 6 months to present the new collections, should also be more related to their philosophy. So I just show you one. There have been many in the last 10 or 12 years, but I just show you the most recent one, which was now just published in October. So where during the time when there were the shows in Paris, the fashion shows, we made an advert in the Libération. It was just by coincidence that Most Def was on the cover, but it's kind of like that. So this is the most popular newspaper, or one of the most popular newspapers in Paris. And what you can already see there is we inserted stickers in the newspaper from the presentation. So on the day of the presentation in Paris, we made some advertisements in the newspaper, but also in the presentation, and we distributed the newspaper already with stickers that we stuck inside. So you see on the right, stickers we printed from the actual fashion show, and the little small ones. This actually on the left there, that's one thing we did. We bought 3 ads in the daily newspaper, just announcing the presentation of Bless on that day in Paris. So the red one is the one that says today Bless. It lists also all the models which were in the show and the location, and also all the people who were involved. So it's like the credits from the show, and it was circulating them during the day in Paris, and the newspaper also announced them. So, and of course, this kind of methods, they have to also very much do with how you think about distribution, or how you go out of regular circles of documenting things, how you deal with basically history, or how do you deal with an event, transforming it into a documentation of the event, or of a collection, or of an artwork. So this is something that I've been very busy for many years, and it's particularly what interests me. And even more than, let's say, graphic design in a sense. It interests me much more to think about the idea of how can you actually document things in a book, and how are they being interpreted, and how are they being read also in the future. So these are a lot of things that we basically try to have fun with. And then what happens also with Less is that after a while after each collection of creating these loads of lookbooks and images, we thought it would be nice if the imagery from these shows could re-enter into the actual collections of Less. So these are, I just put some examples because we did quite a lot also. But these are all textile designs basically that my studio did then in correspondence again with using the imagery from each show and creating a specific textile design. So you can see actually much better originals hanging out there in Randy's shop. If you go on the left, there's the thing on the carpet, and on the wall are some hanging and on the top. And these are all textile designs which are basically always the last collection, then translated into a new textile design. So these are kind of things which I find interesting because it also allows me, or allows in my own praxis to escape also from the 2D and suddenly to see things much more in space, or how the works are worn on bodies and being activated in space. And through that, it happened also that we got more and more involved in architectural projects, or let's say exhibition design or exhibition display projects. And I would also like to show you some of the recent ones we've done. So this is one called Group Affinity. It was actually a summer school in Munich for the period of 2 weeks, where participants could go to Munich and stay in Munich and take part in a summer school for 2 weeks with 6 or 8 different faculties. So it was Chicago Boys, Cinenova, Das Institute, Grand Openings, Tatas, Planning to Rock. So there were different workshops every day, and then with them during this 2-week period, and at the end was an exhibition. But this all happened in an institution which had completely no furniture. There was nothing. It's like an empty exhibition space with white walls, and everyone had to spend 2 weeks there. So they asked me and my studio to basically think about the architecture and the structure for the summer school. So what we did is we had a look around in Munich and tried to find a museum that was closed, which had a lot of material that they were throwing away, and there was a big Yoichi Yamamoto exhibition which was just going down, and so we said, can you ship all the leftovers over to the other institution, and we could use it to build all the furniture. So that's how these benches came about, which are called Group Affinity benches, which you actually can see in OOGA TWOOGA already, I think also for the last 5 years or 4 years. So the original ones, they actually even have all the labels still from the Yoichi Yamamoto exhibition. And they were then used during the summer school. Also these tables, and when the TR are here at OOGA TWOOGA, they were also based on, for the summer school. And basically it was furniture or just different elements which were thought of during the summer school to be assembled in different forms, and everyone could appropriate them. The idea was even that they are quite uncomfortable, so you would even have to react to them. You would have to either move them or improve them or even destroy them. So the idea was never, it's not a perfect piece of furniture. The idea was the opposite, that actually everyone who's in the summer school feels in an uncomfortable situation and has to do something for the exhibition and react to the situation. So what happened in the summer school, of course, is, it got much more chaotic every day, more everyone started occupying spaces more, moving things around a lot. One important part was also that we were involved in the idea of setting it up and how to structure the whole thing. So we decided to have a kitchen actually at the entrance of the institution, because we thought this is the most important part of the summer school. If that's where everyone's going to meet and where everyone's going to interact. So at the entrance of the museum, we had a cook cooking every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all of the participants could be there and basically eat. And it was a place to meet, but it was the entrance of the museum. And then the museum staff was asked to actually work in the exhibition spaces, and the normal room where the staff was working was sound sealed, and it was a practicing room for the bands, which were part also of the summer school. So it kind of shifted also different institutional models and ideas. Yeah, it was really an experience. So at the end, this is what you see there is the exhibition, or different performances, and then the furniture was kind of integrated even into the display of the exhibition. And yes, there's a book also about the process and the whole project. Jumping from that, through that I got more and more interested also, of course, in generating own projects and generating own exhibitions and own book projects. And this, what I would like to show you now is one that I worked on for quite a long time together with Mariana Castillo-Val, who was also here in the audience. We worked together on this for 4 or 5 years. It's a book about designer, philosopher, thinker, theorist called Rogério Duarte from Brazil. I don't know if you're familiar with Tropicalia. For those of you who don't know, Tropicalia was a musical movement that happened at the end of the 60s in Brazil that took the Anthropophagic Manifesto by Oswaldo de Andrade and his ideas and tried to bring rock music, particularly like let's say the Beatles or Rolling Stones, back into a tropical context. So bringing it back to Brazil, to the rhythms that are from there, to the sounds that are from there, and to the own nationality of Brazil. And one of the main protagonists was, or still is, Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, Gal Costa. And Rogério Duarte, he first got known because of all the record sleeves that he made for this movement of Tropicalia. So this, what you can see here is one of the first Tropicalia where it was already recognized as a movement and articulated as such. So this was the first Tropicalia album by Caetano Veloso, and Rogério did all the graphic design. That's another one for Gilberto Gil, which also plays, of course, with particularly the Portuguese history, and that's expressed through the design and the way he uses forms also. Himself, Rogério was very, of course, inspired by modernism from Europe, from Switzerland, Germany, Bauhaus. And some of you, he was a very close collaborator with Glauber Rocha. It's a film director from Brazil. He created his own movement, which is called Cine Novo, which did almost the same like Tropicalia, but in the cinema context, in the film context. If you have the chance to watch this movie, for example, Dois Diablos de Mazola, I strongly recommend. And Glauber Rocha was the director of them, but Rogério was strongly involved in making the graphics and sometimes writing the music. And one of his very first ones of Glauber Rocha, Rogério Duarte, is even the actor together with the artist, so one of this. So he had different ways of collaborating and exchanging ideas, but Rogério has been mainly obsessed always with different segments of design, philosophy, theory, mathematics. He came up with very crucial concepts also, which inspired afterwards Elio Oiticica, the artist, and Mia Clark. One is called Apocalyptic Hypothesis, which I think I will not dive into this now because then we're going to be here another 1.5 hours, because of course through the years together with Mariana we became kind of specialists on the whole Tropicalia and Algeria. Actually, so this is the book. I can also hand it around and have a look at the real thing. And so these are some nice posters that Rogério made also in the beginning, in the mid-60s, when the Parque do Flamengo started, this very known park in Rio de Janeiro. So what they say, the one with birds, it says permanent exhibition of birds. The one next to it says permanent exhibition of fish. And then one next to it, permanent exhibition of trees. So it's very beautiful, I think, particularly for the time. And so Rogério was already 68, very polemic figure and visible figure also in Brazil. And the dictatorship came strongly into power at the time, which had the consequences also that he was arrested and tortured. And he was one of the first people to publicly denounce this in the media, in the press, which afterwards caused, of course, a lot of problems for him and his work, because most of his colleagues, they escaped, or friends, they left Brazil to go to Europe or to the US. So by chance, we basically got to know him, and he's 74 now and lives in Bahia, and we had by accident a chance to meet him, and he asked us to basically could start working on a book by him. But Rogério saw it's such a person that talks extremely fast and jumps from one subject to the next subject, and is like full of energy still at his age, that a lot of people tried to make things about him, but they never could, because they couldn't follow any of his conversations or even of his ideas. And that's why he always had the name Rogério Chaos. This is the official nickname. And so, like, this is just like how he categorizes all the books that he has. You can read it yourself. It's all, I think you understand most of it. I don't think I need to translate it. But so in that sense, we got really interested also in him and started visiting him several times and basically scanning material, started translating archival stuff from him, going through these pieces of papers that he had. But each one, he has like a 3-hour story explaining, no, this is a new concept of how the grid of this here is wrong, and you can basically redefine tar architecture with this drawing. And so like he always has these totally crazy stories, which he always has a very particular point that he's interested in etching, he's interested in making these schemas, which they call in Portuguese, which are basically systems that you can use to draw typography or logos or fonts. So this is one he made, and from that one he actually used to draw these chessboards, so the chess figures. He's also obsessed with chess. And I used it later to create the typeface for the cover of the book. This is a magazine that he published in the 70s, which was also strongly related to the Tropicalia movement, but it was all drawn by different artists by hand. Super beautiful. And this is even going back before Tropicalia. This was kind of the foundations of Tropicalia. It was a design and architecture and literature magazine called Movimiento, where a lot of writers published their first text, and they had a lot of discussions publicly about the dictatorship and also the relation to music and poetry. And for many years he did book covers for different publishers. So this one on the right is actually him. This is a poem by Rogério. You can read yourself. This is another record sleeve. So it took quite a while for us to of course, get together the text, especially one text, has been very important to us in the sense that it's called Notes on Industrial Design. And when I read this text, I was very amazed like how it can still be so up to date now, because it talks about different appropriations in Brazil of industrial design and how industrial design needs to be more related also to the people from Brazil and the average day living and the human person or something in that sense. And that was actually the reason how we got in touch with Jerry Fusion's text. So the book has this text translated into English, and of course for the first time tried to document different sides of his work, so graphic design and the writing, the poetry, the theory, the drawings even. This is a particularly beautiful album cover we made for Shoshi Mountain. And the book cover was inspired by this one, it was kind of a reference of it. These are just extracts now from the book. And so we did an exhibition then with after the book. Well, thanks to a friend, we could do an exhibition in Frankfurt at the Porticus, and also finally finalized the book. The exhibition combined, of course, all the different works again in the exhibition space, and also video documentation and some films of John Russia. Very simple, it was just spread out on the table. Table that would expand into the space and grow. So these are just extracts from the exhibition in Frankfurt. And particularly with this, it was of course important for us, or close to our hearts, that this show would go back also to Brazil. Well, Roger actually came to Germany, the same on the train from Frankfurt to Berlin, trying to learn German, which he actually managed within 3 days, and he was already translating Holland into. And last summer, this exhibition was now at the Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro, where the display was changed, but it still had the same idea that you have a very large table with all the different objects spread around it, and the posters were hanging on the wall. Because most of the stuff that he produced, they were actually objects to handle. They're not artworks as such, they're everyday objects. These records were printed in editions of thousands, and the books were made also things to read, not like objects between bytrans that you couldn't touch. So we tried to create this in the exhibition space with a big table that was so big that you actually couldn't reach the objects, so no one could steal them. But and we created then in Rio was also important. There was an event where different friends of his came then. So Shoshi Mountain, for example, was there where he played in the sculpture that Rogerio made. It's called Mus Cupola, and he has a whole theory about how it takes the energy of the space, and if someone plays music inside, the energy evaporates into the atmosphere. And Caetano will also played there. And so, of course, they all performed songs which Rogerio wrote. He wrote a lot of the lyrics. This is what I forgot to mention. He wrote a lot of the lyrics actually for Tropicalia, for the records. So, jumping to another project now. So, my studio was approached suddenly from an art fair in Berlin, already in 2010. We were approached by them to think about the architecture for the art for ABC, which is an art fair in Berlin. Because they had seen Group Affinity and they thought it was really interesting how we dealt with the space and also questions of of very simple solutions which were not too costly, I guess. So my studio, we came up with a concept for this art fair which was based on an idea of making the first art fair which is totally sustainable. So everything that is used in the art fair is basically rented material or things that could go back, and there would be no hidden situations. So everything was transparent. There were no secret rooms. There were no cables hidden. There were no carpets. Everything was open. So if you had video projectors, you could see the carpets. If there were sculptures, there was nothing to hide. So we came up with this concept, which were 10 or 12 different modular elements, which are kind of like, imagine them like Lego, and the galleries would get these different elements, and then they can build their own gallery booth Lego set. And basically everything was done with scaffoldings and drywall equipment, just from building sites, because this is a material that you can basically rent for 4 days extremely cheaply, and we try to appropriate them with very simple boards to create the spaces and to create different situations. So these are just some examples now without the galleries and empty. So we created different freestanding systems, how these boards could be attached to different scaffoldings and to different things that could be rented during the period. Of course, everything had to be extremely secure, so back and forth, or different weight systems, but I thought that they were also extremely beautiful, these concrete weights, and should be really visible in the fair, and not like, again, hidden. So this is how, for example, if a gallerist really had a lot of money and you really wanted to have his white cube, you could actually create a white cube with a scaffolding, but it's absurd, because if you understood the concept of the fair, it was like the opposite that we're trying to create within it. So in the first year, we actually really managed to recycle more than 80% of all the material. There was hardly no waste from the art fair. The way we did it is that the boards, you can see the white boards, they could afterwards be bought by different galleries or museums, or they were donated to them. So, because they were so plain and so simple that we basically just filled them with a filler, painted them white, and it was a regular wall that could be reused even in a house or in a flat. So a lot of people, even the first time, a lot of people came and picked them up and they bought a lot of them in pallets. So after the first year, they asked us again if they could if they could use this concept again for the fair the second time. And we were like, oh yeah, of course, do it, because we didn't have much to do with it even anymore, because the concept was there and then it was used again for the second year. But what happened was super interesting. The second year, most artists in the fair, they started actually reacting already to the architecture. So the artists integrated the actual fair architecture into the artwork. And this is the point where for me it became like super interesting, because suddenly they used the displays as an artwork or being part of it. So this is, for example, a Manfred Panis, but he just used the fences we rented and then he made a piece out of it. This is another, it's a painter, but again, it starts having this dialogue also with fair architecture. And I touched a little bit on it before, but we also, the signage system, we also did it with the principle that it could be something that's very open again. So the concept was just that it's on the floor and people could, or artists or galleries could just place it wherever they wanted according to their own choice. And due to it always being on the floor, the visitors immediately understood after a while that all the labeling and all the signage is on the floor. So, and what I like about it is giving this open space also, this open space of interpretation, this open space where things can be appropriated and they start going their own way and start having their own life in a way which is not just totally unplanned or a surprise. And then this is one of the last projects I would like to talk about. And we could shortly to mention with the ABC, they reused it a third year in a row, and so the third time they liked it again and they asked us again if we could use the concept. So, and the last one they would actually manage to recycle 90% of all the materials for the artwork. So, and one of the main reasons why I was so obsessed with it, because I got more and more involved into exhibitions and design, and it's just it's crazy the amount of material and waste that's produced in that industry just to sell one piece of artwork at a high cost price. You know? So imagine an art fair, 150 galleries in 6,000 square meters. You know, they don't really care. What they care about is that the artwork looks as slick and as neat as possible, and that it's sold in those 3 days. But they're not worried about if there's a 200 square meter carpet that is then thrown out or you. So in that sense, the ABC, I can say, is really the first art fair which managed to also be a little bit more responsible. They have a new architect now, which is not. But then my studio was invited to an exhibition in Oaxaca, in the south of Mexico, in Oaxaca City. And because I also spent a lot of time in Mexico, I knew the context quite well, and I said it would be super nice if we actually go to Oaxaca and work there as a whole studio for 2 or 3 months, instead of just sending all the material over and being exhibited there. They wanted to make an exhibition about the books. So we said, okay, it would be really nice for us to actually work in Oaxaca for a long period with artisans, because Oaxaca is the highest density of artisania or artisans even in Latin America. So it's really it's a lot. It's not just for tourism, it's also families who continue it, who hand it down, but of course the majority of it is also for tourism. But we thought it would be really interesting as a design studio to go there and to work with artisans in the local context, thinking about local materials and local techniques, but taking, for example, objects that come out of a globalized context and reappropriate them again back into Oaxaca. So, for example, we didn't want to print any absent plastic inkjet posters. So what we did is we made these carpets, which in the end announced the exhibition, and they were scattered around town. And in the exhibition, we worked with a local furniture, or it's also a sustainable community which runs in own forests where things are replanted, and they also produce their own furniture. And they also have shops where they sell it. And then we started working on the different furniture objects and the architectural grid that you can see, the kind of solid structure, which we used then as an archive to bring in different objects and different discourses and put them parallel also to the projects from the studio. So there on the right, for example, you can see less textile, but then these are baskets which were woven by this is the baskets the artisans were weaving that we then started collaborating with on a chair. So we also put the original ones in the structure, or these are used for either soup or drinking mezcal. It's a book I designed, my studio design for Eliotistica, was also these are leftovers from burning black clay, but And there were also objects mixed in, which come out very popular design objects that are not necessarily made by us, but they're circulated in Expo or in sold in Apple, because the exhibition toured, and in one of the stops we went to a place called Archivo, and they had also an archive of popular art objects, so we integrated them. So this is a cow bone that we transformed into a book stand, a cow jaw. So this is the exhibition. It went also back to Germany. So different roots used for cleaning, but they're beautiful objects, so we also put them on display. Then there were these tables which had all the books from the studio or all the printed matter. This is a kind of classic table and chair that we designed already years ago in the studio. And we made an Oaxaca version which uses the local woods. So each kind of, it's called cake table. It's the same like cake. You can put it down and sit on it or work on the table. And each piece of the cake is made out of a different type of wood. That's another. The exhibition went to 4 different locations. So this is now in Berlin. So these are more the proposals also that we did. So we have these typical monoblock stools, and we did different woven carpets that could cover them and basically change them into something more comfortable or nicer. This is another chair we made. It comes from where you normally on the market cut the tacos. But the idea is that it's the same wood from where you cut tacos in, but in the base is normally where you can use cactus stands, where you can put in the cactus plant inside of a pot. So we put the 2 things together, and the idea is basically it's a piece of furniture. When you leave it outside in the garden, the wood absorbs the water so much that the wood basically cracks and explodes. I don't have a picture now of how most of them look like now, but most of them have huge cracks and starts forming. And this is the chair we made with the artisans who work with the baskets that I showed you before. So this is the classical monoblock chair that gets shipped around the world for very low money. You can find everywhere, but we try to not just, which you also find in Oaxaca everywhere now, but we thought about the idea of these globalized objects and globalized products to reappropriate them again with the local materials. So this is one of the chairs we then designed, which was just a mold of the negative space of the monoblock chair. So, if you have kind of questions for any of the projects. Yes.
I was wondering, how did the book distributor, with the Tris Von Mitchell book, the first one, how did the publisher or distributor, for the Tris Von Mitchell book, how did the publisher or distributor respond to the idea that there was 2 different books that no one knew what they were? And in general, just like, do you get excited for those kind of, like, I feel like there's a lot of problem solving in the work in general, but there's also like kind of a little bit of mischievousness, and a little bit of mischievousness, you know what I mean? Like a little bit of maybe fun with that kind of stuff, like how people will deal with it, and just...
Yes, I mean, the publisher was actually, I think, informed, but he didn't really care so much about it. I don't think it didn't interest him very much. He just wanted to have his amount of copies of books that he could sell, and they all had the same ISBN number, and that's it. So, but yes, the galleries particularly, and the people who were working closer with Tris, they were all informed. So they all knew, and they all, of course, got 2 books. But nice thing, of course, is much more that, you know, that sometimes you encounter that surprise, you know? The moment of surprise that someone maybe read one and didn't know that the other one was there, or someone read one of the books and then goes to performance by Tris, and then suddenly the same piece is performed in a totally different way. So that kind of game I find very interesting in the context of his work, because that's also what he does, and how to take that into making a book. You know? That is, because a book is normally something which is very fixed, you know, and of course, which is something that you cannot argue with, and if it's written in one way, that's how it's written. So that book tried to make that attempt to write multiple stories, different stories in different directions of how what his work is.
Any other questions?
What is your next project?
Yeah, well, I always work on many books parallel, and of course I also started. I started a publishing house also 3-4 years ago, so I worked also as a publisher quite a bit now for the last 2-3 years, and I actually enjoy it because it's also suddenly also a lot of books are being involved, which I don't necessarily design, but it then becomes also about publishing art or publishing certain books. It's kind of started occupying more and more space actually. It's most of the books you can see out here if you go out, or even some of them are shown here. But it's a lot of artist books or things that I find interesting, or even of that artists, friends come to me and they would like to publish. So sometimes even the publishing houses just use it as a platform for that. So it becomes kind of an intermingle also of different ideas, also friends and people that you're in dialogue with, basically. And Booga became, or is becoming more and more that also artist friends, you know, just use it as a platform to distribute the book or to show it.
What was the name of the residency where you were in Mexico?
It was not a residency. The exhibition, you mean?
Yeah.
There was a center, it's called Centro de Diseño de Oaxaca. It's the Center for Design of Oaxaca. It doesn't exist anymore. They closed, sadly enough, they closed a year ago because of the change of the government. The government decided that they would not want to put money into that anymore. Which is really sad because it had a kind of long-term plan, but they also had certain problematic after direction left there, so they shut it down.
Oh, what a shame. I love what you did.
Yeah, they did some other nice projects also, some other exhibitions, and the idea was mainly it's a center for design that works also with local contexts. And some friends of mine, they actually started continuing a little bit, or let's say even in a better way, this philosophy of Centro de Oaxaca, but they became an NGO and they started working particularly with the artisans in Oaxaca very closely. And we also published a book about their work. It's called Portrait of Oaxaca, Fire and Clay. It's a book you can find out there. They are called Innovando la Tradición.
For your books, I have the impression that you will find the clients or most time you generate the content. In the case of Pajari Roa, you probably spend a long time with him, and I wonder before going there, you know already that you have the funding to have the book afterwards, or to spend all the time generating the content?
Well, particularly with Rogerio Duarte's book, I didn't do the content. The content is, of course, him, you know? It's his work and it's his life. So it's the same when you start collaborating on an artist. It's usually about the artist's work and an artist. So it's not about me, it's actually about taking me away from that as a designer, and as an editor. It's about them thinking what is necessary to make this work look good or ugly or better or worse, or so. And with Rogerio, yes, the financing of it. I mean, this is a book where, of course, we together with Mariana and Rogerio we wanted to make this project, and it was almost impossible to finance it because the problematic was at the very beginning Rogerio refused to take funding from Brazil. It's because he had this problematic relationship with Brazil all his life during the dictatorship. So we tried to look for funding abroad, but applying for funding abroad means that you have to first explain what's Tropicalia, who's Rogerio Duarte, he's a poet, he worked with Claudia Rocha, and in Germany no one knows. Everyone was like, who's this guy? Why do you want to make a book of it? So it became really problematic. It became extremely difficult to actually find the support and also the platform to show his work outside Brazil even, And inside Brazil it was the problem that he didn't want to be associated with governmental money. So, which of course in a lot of the institutions, a lot of people said, if you want to do this book, we give you money because Rogerio Duarte is a star that we need the stamp of the government on it. And Rogerio was like, no, I don't want to do that. So it became problematic, but in the end, he agreed because there was what kind of was key to make that project happen was the Frankfurt Book Fair. It's one of the biggest book fairs. It had the guest country Brazil. So we managed to get a grant to do all the translations. And also the institutions then in Frankfurt, they were supposed to put on exhibitions about Brazilian artists. And Sophie Olvers, the curator from which you saw here actually in Los Angeles, she then said like, hey, I heard that you're doing this project about this guy from Bahia, maybe it's interesting to show in Portugal. And I said, yeah, I would love to. And she then made it possible that we could do the exhibition here and have enough support to do the book. So it's every time, there's no setup. So it's every time it's different. And it was particularly for Rogerio, it took 3 years to, we already had the work, the documentation, after 2.5 years was done, but then to finance everything, to make it possible, it took another 2 years. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Yes.